Did you ever have a model train set when you were a kid, or model cars? Or I know it was really popular when I was a kid and used to get these model planes and things in boxes and just spend weeks sometimes building these things. But before these were mass produced and available in the toy store, people actually built these things from scratch. We are neck deep in hobbies. I think the last couple of episodes I've shown the stack of folders. I don't need to do it again. It's about this high, just on hobbies, on people that had really strange and unusual hobbies. And for this week's episode, and I think next week as well, I've kind of laid it out here, and there's certainly enough here for 2 episodes. We're going to get into hobbies, miniatures, and models. The thing that amazes me about all these people, and strange as it seems, they spent so much time and dedication on things like these hobbies, or breaking records as we did a few weeks back. They had the same 24 hours a day that we do, and it just never ceases to astonish me, and I find it a little bit inspirational that these people were able to make such great use and such creative use of their time. Before we dive into this week's episode on miniatures and models, I'd like to ask, if you like content like this or are enjoying the episode, please hit the bell to subscribe, follow, hit the bell to like, and most importantly, if you've inspired, please leave a comment. That engagement goes a long way to helping me bring back this 100-year-old brand from the dustbin of history, roaring right back into the digital age. Welcome back. This is Jeff Hicks, curator of the Strange As It Seems archives and grandnephew of John Hicks, who created Strange As It Seems back in the late 1920s. I was thinking myself, have I ever built, as I got into all these miniatures and models, and I remember getting models when I was a kid, model planes and model trains, but I'm trying to remember if I ever built one. And I remembered in high school, if any of my high school friends are watching, we all went to San Marino High School here in Southern California, but I do remember building popsicle stick bridges. I think it was our senior year in high school, right? It was the physics project, one of the physics projects that we had to build. And I came across this one to kind of kick off that sort of reminded me of that, which was a delicate bridge here. This is 1942, December 22nd, but a delicate bridge constructed entirely of toothpicks. And I remember, I think it was a competition, right? How much weight could we hold? And if we could build a popsicle bridge that could hold like 2 or 3 pounds, you won. But this guy built of toothpicks, it actually supports 10 pounds of books. The guy also was featured later. I guess he built this huge replica of the Eiffel Tower, also made entirely of toothpicks. Russell Stein from New York City. I guess he's made over 75 models, using over more than 1 million toothpicks. So pretty amazing. Got a letter here from Russell Stein in New York City. And it looks like, I think, got a newspaper article. I guess he's a dentist. That makes sense, right? Making models out of toothpicks. But Russell Stein, the dentist, making, there's got a span of toothpicks. Eiffel Tower, also a model of a giant Ferris wheel. And speaking of San Marino, this one caught my eye. I saw a letter in here called from the San Marino and Santa Fe Railroad, and apparently Minton Cronkite from our hometown of San Marino, California, or Pasadena, we were right next door, has a 2,500 foot railroad track in his backyard. The miniature line had 310 pieces, including 32 locomotives. And here's an article in the Los Angeles Times. San Marino man develops his own railroad at home, and some really fascinating photographs of the model trains that he built. Wow, look at that. That's his entire gosh, that really does look like San Marino, funny enough. The San Gabriel Valley, right? We're right underneath the San Gabriel Mountains, and another one of the Santa Fe engine. So the San Marino and Santa Fe Railroad, San Marino, California. speaking of model trains, let's do that. Usually I do this kind of chronologically from the John Hicks era, who is my grand uncle, to Ernest Hicks, my grandfather, and then to my grandmother, and then, of course, to my parents in the late 60s. I come from a long line of oddity hunters. And let's stay on the subject of model trains. I usually do these kind of chronologically, but I think in this case, looking at these miniatures and models, we've got model trains, got kind of other powered boats and things like that that were actually powered, which is incredible. We've got kind of the miniatures and things like that, as well as kind of the carvings, right? People that made models of buildings and such. So I think that might be really kind of an interesting way to group this one. So sticking with, let's stay on model trains for a minute, because this is pretty amazing. Here's a guy, 53 years old. This is in the early 1939. At this point, he had a model train. Looks like a toy train he had for 51 years. Over 50 years he'd had this model train. He got it when he was 2 years old, and he kept it in working condition for 50 years. Isn't that incredible? I think I went through about 3 or 4 different model trains that I kept breaking and getting new ones when I was a kid. But this guy took care of his model train. I wonder if it's still around. John Lowe. If the Lowe family still has that, I have a handwritten letter from John Lowe here. But if the family still has that train, definitely hit me in the comments below. Would love to find it and see a modern day picture of it if it's still around and in working order. Pretty amazing. And all throughout these folders, in this episode and the next, the miniaturization of some of these things is absolutely extraordinary. Staying on trains here for a minute, here's a platinum locomotive, correct in every detail. This is so small it can fit through a finger ring, and it was a jeweled locomotive model, birthday gift to his wife. Absolutely gorgeous. Owned by Mrs. Oscar Williams, Pelham Manor, New York. And I don't have a photograph, but I do have the article here. What a gorgeous creation this is by Mr. Oscar Williams for his wife. And here's another model train. This is even a guy that worked, I guess, at the Chicago and Northwestern Railway Company. I love this too. John Lindsay of Chicago spent 10,000 hours, right? Wasn't it Malcolm Gladwell that said if you spend 10,000 hours on something, you become an absolute expert at it? But this took him 10,000 hours. Look at that beautiful locomotive. It's a perfect 8-foot model of a locomotive, complete in all working details, by John Lindsay. The amazing thing about this guy, he's never even been inside the cab of a locomotive. And check out this kid from time of my grandma Elsie Hicks, early 1950s. But John Sunier of Iowa City, Iowa, he's been building this model railroad for 5 years. Crazy. Consists of 175 feet of track, 17 switches, 3 engines, 18 cars, 25 buildings, and 76 push-button controls. All of his own construction. He's only 15 years old. He's been building this thing since he was 10. Here's a great photograph of, wow, he's even got the model car to go next to the train tracks. And I love this, the letter from the Boy Scouts of America. Very truly yours, Johnny Sunier. What an amazing kid. I'm now 15 years old. The name of my layout is the Beaver Valley Lines. Crazy. Some newspaper clippings. He was featured in the Railroad Model Craftsman magazine and the Toy Trains magazine. Earned him $20 so far. And here's one that looked like it was pretty famous for the area that it was in. It was called the Little Southern Railway, scale model railroad owned by W.W. Haverly of Lexington, Kentucky. So this one had 17 steam locomotives, 75 passenger cars, 225 freight cars, over 2,800 feet of track. Other facilities include a 12-track terminal complete with station, a steam engine terminal with a turntable, a freight and passenger stations, control panel that has more gadgets than a pilot's compartment of an airliner. This is in 1952. There's a great photograph of it in the, looks like kind of the porch or maybe the attic. Another great photograph, kind of top down, of all the lines there. What an amazing, and even has his own letterhead, the Southern Railway System. What an amazing, and there's an article in here, the Little Southern Railway. More business equipment and operating personnel that it knows what to do with. It just has one problem: space for expansion. Since the only logical rerouting would have the Tennessean and the Crescent meeting under Mrs. W.W. Haverly's four-poster bed, it's likely that the Little Southern will stop growing or move elsewhere. But a great article, 3 generations working on this of the Haverly family. What an amazing railroad there. Can you imagine being a kid in that family? How much fun would that be? And here's one for the fans of the game of Monopoly, right? You got B&O Railroad, you got Reading Railroad, right? Well, here is a locomotive, passenger locomotive, built by the apprentices in the Reading Company shops of Reading, Pennsylvania. Perfect locomotive, perfect working model of the Pacific Type G1SA locomotive. Has every working part employed in the original. I love this. Here's the story about building the model. The Reading Company Junior Boosters Organization, composed of Reading Company apprentices, decided to undertake the construction of a model locomotive on their own time with the approval of the management. The apprentices felt that the project would be a valuable addition to their shop training and provide pleasure as well. Oh, and I love this too on the back of the working model passenger locomotive. The Reading Company Junior Boosters Organization, composed of Reading Company apprentices, decided to undertake the construction of a model locomotive on their own time with the approval of management. The apprentices felt that the project would be a valuable addition to their shop training and provide pleasure as well. And speaking of Reading, Pennsylvania, we'll finish up the trains with this guy. He is amazing. He's featured all throughout, strange as it seems. I've got all kinds. Check out, this is the stack of handwritten letters from a Mr. Adelbert Boyer. What an incredible photograph of him here. He had all kinds of miniatures. In fact, I got a list of all the things he made that were miniatures. Imitation trolley tickets, an imitation 2-cent stamp, oil paintings, silver coins, and he did a whole bunch of stuff on the head of a pin. 1943, he did an oil portrait of George Washington painted on the head of a pin. Abraham Lincoln as well, the Lord's Prayer, all of this stuff. But it was this amazing miniature model he made. Here's the photograph of him holding it in his hands. And then I have a photograph of it itself, but it was called the Crusader, a New York to Philadelphia train, and it was only 2 3/4 inches long, made of aluminum, and it's authentic even down to the real glass windows. Yeah, here it is. The photograph of it. And this thing was so amazing that in 1939, John Hicks actually asked him if he could feature it at the New York World's Fair. A great story there in the Strange as It Seems annals. John Hicks had been competing with Ripley for about 10 years, Ripley's Believe It or Not. And in 1939, the New York World's Fair chose Strange as It Seems over Ripley and gave John Hicks the spot at the 1939 World's Fair. Ripley was so pissed off, he ended up opening the first auditorium, ODD, down the road to compete with the 1939 World's Fair. And funny enough, those auditoriums are what's left of Ripley's Believe It or Not throughout the world, right? There's one here in Hollywood, but those auditoriums, those museums of oddities was actually started because John Hicks scooped him for a spot at the 1939 World's Fair. Incredible, but featured there, the model of the Crusader by Adelbert Boyer. And here's this guy. I mentioned him before, but he also built these incredible miniatures. He appeared in the John Hicks scrapbook, so kind of a brief mention of him a couple episodes back. But crazy. Jules Sharpneau, also a Los Angeles man, but he had a hazelnut shell. This was featured in 1934, had 3,100 sterling silver teaspoons, each perfect in detail, that fit into a hazelnut shell. But this guy was another one of these that just made so many tiny things. There's a great article in here by, they're tiny, but they work. And it's all of these. He had a Franklin's printing press, a cash register, which actually ran with a toothpick, electric refrigerator, crazy, a radial airplane motor, crazy, ivory carvings as well, and even a miniature piano. This guy was just really amazing. I think I've got some photographs as well. He was featured at the Egyptian Theater in Hollywood, the world's largest exhibit of tiniest things. What an amazing guy. Here's the hazelnut, I guess a Bible. What did he have? And all these things, a little Derringer pistol. Thousands of tiny things in quite an odd collection. Amazing Jules Sharpneau. So let's wrap up this episode just on the subject of miniatures, although I think there's still quite a few more left. But here's an amazing miniature. This is the paper making machine by the Franklin Institute, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And check this out. Here's a photograph of it. It turns out 5 feet of 8.5-inch paper per minute. Crazy. 15 feet long by 3.5 wide, complete in every single detail. And here's a great, I imagine this was paper printed by the machine itself, the paper making machine, but a brief description of it here, straight from the Franklin Institute of the state of Pennsylvania. Machine can produce 3 or 4 pounds of paper per hour. Probably the first American-built model paper-making machine, and the only paper-making exhibit on the continent. Crazy. And on the back, I love this, the progress of paper going all the way back to 105 AD, the discovery of the art of paper making by the Chinese, up through 1934. When this was done, the America was now producing half the paper output of the world, which reminded me, I did a really fascinating, strange as it seems, about maybe 12, 13 years ago, not about how paper was made by trees, but why. Extraordinary story of the French scientist for show. He was walking through the woods, happened to look up and see a wasp's nest, and realized that it was made of paper, and there was a paper shortage going on at the time, and that gave him the idea of pulping paper by trees. Fascinating episode. Check it out below. Why paper was made from trees here at Strange As It Seems. And that wraps up this episode. We're going to keep going next week because I still have more to go here. But thank you for joining for this extraordinary episode, one of 2 on miniatures and models. If you like content like this, please hit the bell to subscribe, hit the bell to like, and would love to hear a comment. Do you have a strange hobby, or do you have models, collections, family members that were into this way back when people, even though they had the same amount of time we do, spent that time doing extraordinary hobbies like this? And I'll wrap up, as I always do, with the foreword from John Hicks's first book. In 1928, the author launches this book of the curious in nature and humankind on the vast sea of public opinion, with the hope that it will fulfill its mission to entertain and acquaint its readers with some of the marvels of the world in which we live.